Welcome to the Young Turks. Got a hell of a show ahead for you guys. A little bit later in the program, I've got the stock market collapse. You're never going to believe who they're blaming it on. / you will, but you will be amused by it. And did Trump ever talk about the stock market? I mean, stock market, what name so? That's going to be an awesome story. Also, we've got a prosperity preacher in the show. They're always awesome, although this one leading to disastrous results. We will tell you about that a little bit later in the program. And I had warned you guys that the TYT party / rally was going to be sold out. It now is. Nana boo boo. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. No, it is sold out. But a little bit later in the program, I'll tell members how they can upgrade their tickets, get more tickets, and be able to watch the party from wherever they are. So tytnetwork.com/join to become a member. I'll tell you about that a little bit later. Let's go over here. We got a lot of show. Okay. So Donald Trump is considering whether he's going to go talk to Special Counsel Robert Mueller. Apparently his lawyers are split on this issue. Ty Cobb thinks that he should go talk to Mueller and cooperate with him fully and get the investigation done as soon as possible because Donald Trump is innocent. That's a good one. Anyway, all the other lawyers for Donald Trump are saying in unison, no, don't go to talk to Mueller. And the New York Times has the story, and as you'll see, there's a good reason for him to duck. Lawyers for President Trump have advised him against sitting down for a wide-ranging interview with Special Counsel Robert S. Mueller III, according to 4 people briefed on the matter. Let's find out why. His lawyers are concerned that the president, who has a history of making false statements and contradicting himself, could be charged with lying to investigators. Yeah, that'd be a good reason not to talk to them. And will he lie to Mueller? That's an absolute certainty. That is more certain than E = MC squared. Has Donald Trump ever gone 2 sentences in a row without lying? Or contradicting himself, or both? So the lawyer's advising him to restrain himself and basically tie him up, make sure he doesn't go anywhere near Mueller, I think are correct, so I hope he doesn't listen to them. In fact, Donald, who's smarter, you or your stupid lawyers? Donald, who's smarter, you or Mueller? They're saying Mueller's gonna outwit you. Is that possible, Donald? That someone could outsmart you when you got a 30 out of 30 on a test that tells you whether you have dementia or not? I mean, come on, don't listen to your lawyers. You got this, dog. Ty Cobb's one of the greatest hitters of all time. He knows what he's talking about. You go follow his advice. Anyway, their stance puts them at odds with Mr. Trump. Yes, okay, who has said publicly and privately that he is eager to speak with Mr. Mueller as part of the investigation into possible ties between his associates and Russia's election interference and whether he obstructed justice. And that's because Donald Trump knows something that they don't know. He's got this, dog. I don't know if you know, here, in case you don't know it, I apparently have to remind you. I have to guess now because I don't have it in front of me.
You're a pirate.
No, not that one.
I'm like a smart person.
There he is, he's like a smart person. What else do you need? New York Times continues, Mr. Trump's penchant for bravado has been a factor that his lawyers must contend with. The president has bragged to some aides that he would be able to clear himself if he talked to Mr. Mueller's team. And in fact, Donald Trump has said publicly, quote, I'm looking forward to it, actually. This is why Donald Trump beat George W. Bush in a poll that we had as to who was dumber. Because at least Bush knew that he wasn't that bright. Trump really thinks that acing a dementia test means he's a very stable genius. This buffoon thinks he's smarter than Robert Mueller and would, in the middle of an interview, convince Mueller that he didn't do it. He'd just talk him into it. Oh, please try, Donald. Whatever you do not listen to your advisors. They don't have your best interest at heart. You, on the other hand, can convince all those prosecutors that you didn't do it. Good luck with it. Hey, and by the way, if you didn't do it, what do you have to hide, right? here are people counseling otherwise. Though New York Times explains it would be certain to prompt accusations if he doesn't do it that the president is hiding something, and a court fight could prolong the special counsel inquiry, casting a shadow over Republicans as November's midterm elections approach or beyond into the president's re-election campaign. So that's another good reason to do it, because it will cast a shadow, and you might have to face a grand jury, which would be even worse for Donald Trump. Now, refusing to sit for an interview opens the possibility that Mr. Mueller will subpoena the president to testify before a grand jury. There it is, setting up a court fight that would drastically escalate the investigation and could be decided by the Supreme Court. So, look, it could go either way. His advisors are saying on a political front, maybe you could just stretch it out and until Mueller's investigation becomes untenable and they can't ever talk to you, or it creates a constitutional crisis when you don't listen to a prosecutor. And by the way, you must, because of the Nixon tapes, we came to the conclusion, which should have been obvious all along, that the president is not above the law, and if he has a subpoena, he must actually go and follow through on it like any other citizen would. So if he doesn't, that would create a constitutional crisis, and we don't know how that would wind up. But in all seriousness, I think that Donald Trump should speak to the prosecutor because he has legitimate questions to ask, and it's true. If he really didn't do it, then he doesn't have anything to hide. I tend to think that his lawyers are right, that he's not going to help himself in those cases. Part of that belief rests on the fact that I think he does have a relationship with Russia. I think it is financial, but that's the whole point of the investigation. And if he really is innocent, then maybe Ty Cobb, his lawyer, is right that he should go talk to Mueller and clear it up and say, look here, I don't have any financial ties, I didn't do anything for the Russians, etc. And only Donald Trump would know that, so it makes sense to talk to him. But one last note of caution comes from Donald Trump's friend Newt Gingrich, who said, the idea of putting Trump in a room with 5 or 6 hardened, very clever lawyers, all of whom are trying to trick him and trap him, would be a very, very bad idea. In other words, they are clever, and I'm not convinced that he's a very stable genius. And so that could be a recipe for disaster. So either way, it doesn't look good for Donald Trump, but for the sake of the country, I hope he does go testify one way or another so we can get at the truth and either have a conclusion that where the prosecutors do actually find out that he did something wrong, or a conclusion where they find out he didn't. But either way, have a resolution. And for the rest of us, also a bit of entertainment, because that testimony is going to be outrageous any way you slice it. Okay, now moving on to another Donald Trump story, this time about his instability. And I think that it's a little bit of fun, but it's mainly very important for what could happen next, okay? Fun, I mean, fun's a relative term in the Trump era, right? When anything can go wrong. Okay, so Vanity Fair has an interesting article from Gabriel Sherman about Donald Trump and more internal drama at the White House. Now, this could have huge consequences depending on how it shakes out, because I believe Donald Trump is unstable, although, again, he claims to be a very stable genius, and that, in fact, that's one of his top 2 traits in his life, that he has mental stability. Okay, if you got to brag about that, you might have stories like this. So we go to Vanity Fair. After the much hyped Nunes memo failed to deliver the narrative reset that the White House hoped for, Donald Trump is discussing a shakeup to his West Wing, 3 sources familiar with the president thinking told me. These people say the president is increasingly frustrated that members of his administration aren't going to war for him, and he's being encouraged by his daughter Ivanka to bring in new blood. Excellent. That's what I like to hear. Now, here's why. Now, look, it's a little bit dangerous. John Kelly is the only guy keeping this guy on an even keel. John Kelly is his chief of staff, former general, and I'm not a fan of John Kelly. I think he's deeply right-wing. That's why he's part of the Trump administration. But at least he's not a lunatic, so he has kept out a lot of the crazies from the White House, tried to keep Donald Trump as even-tempered as he could possibly do, which is an unenviable task. Without John Kelly, these clowns will go to war with each other again. They'll form more circular firing squads, there'll be more leaks than ever, and Donald Trump will become more unstable than ever. The reason I say it's dangerous is because course, he's the president of the United States and has access to nuclear weapons, and that's the main concern about Donald Trump. The good part of that is that you can speed up the clock for when he's leaving office. If John Kelly goes tick, 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 until Trump blows himself up, hopefully he doesn't blow up the world along with him and not the economy, but certainly his own administration. So, which leads us to a GOP source that says that Trump and some of his closer advisors are frustrated with John Kelly because, quote, it's like Kelly views Trump as a mushroom. He wants to keep him in the dark and feed him a bunch of shit. Well, what else would you do with Trump? So what do you want to do? Oh yeah, Donald, go out there and tweet like crazy. You got him, dog. Oh, go on non-Fox News shows? Absolutely. Remember when you went on NBC and admitted that you fired the FBI director because he was conducting an investigation of Russia and your connections, which was obstruction of justice that you admitted publicly? Have at it, Hoss, do more of that. You're a genius, you got this, Donald. Of course, you have to keep him in the dark and then say, oh, Donald, man, things are going great. Are you kidding me? Whatever you do, you don't need to tweet, you don't need to go on TV. Everything's great, just keep it going. Talk to congressmen where you could tell them different things every other sentence and confuse the hell out of them and make things harder for the Republicans. No, you don't need to talk to congressmen. So look, I think Kelly's the only thing keeping this place together. And it looks like they've got their knives out for him. So let's do a couple of shivs here and see where it winds up. Here we go. Trump has recently told advisors he wants a killer, to continue with the analogy, to steer the White House's response to Robert Mueller's investigation and craft a midterm election message for him to stomp on this fall. John Kelly was a general, but apparently not killer enough. At the end, I'll tell you who he thinks are the real killers. That ought to be great. So who's driving this? Look at this. Ivanka, who's been frustrated with Chief of Staff John Kelly, has told her father that he needs people around him that will put his interests above their own. Quote, she wants to clean house, a Trump friend told me. You know, there's this theory that Ivanka Trump was the smart one in the Trump family. Now, that is a low bar. I mean, have you seen her father? Have you seen her brothers? So, but it turns out her and Jared Kushner, her husband, are going around shivving all of their political enemies inside the White House. Bannon's gone, some of the base, I mean, not much of the base, but he at least could help craft messages for the base. So that's gone. Priebus was with the establishment, he's gone. Sean Spicer's gone, everybody's gone. Scaramucci's gone. And so if you're wondering who shivved them all, well, the last man standing, or in this case, last woman standing, Ivanka, the one person he'll never ever fire, it's his daughter, the one person that he cherishes outside of himself. So now she's frustrated that she's not in charge and that John Kelly's in charge. So here come, a couple of homemade shivs that have got John Kelly written all over it. But once you fire him too, who's left with experience in the White House? Who's ever done this before? So now you're gonna have Ivanka and Jared running the whole White House? Recipe for disaster. More where that came from. In recent weeks, Trump has publicly clashed with Chief of Staff John Kelly after Kelly took a more active role in White House policymaking and messaging. Now, why? Why did they clash? Because John Kelly said some things on television that were sane, and Trump did not like that. He's like, why isn't he defending me 100% and calling me a stable genius? And why isn't he telling everybody the Democrats are all traitors? And well, because he has a shred of credibility and not much decency, but a little bit. And he feels bad about saying things that are patently untrue and ridiculous. So Trump, of course, is furious with him. Kelly's not gonna help his cause because today, Manu Raju from CNN reporting, John Kelly on whether Trump has read the Schiff memo, that's the Democrats' answer to Nunes' memo about the FBI, quote, no, it's quite lengthy. We are told it's 10 pages. So Trump will get mad at that. He's saying I didn't read a memo because it was 10 pages long. Did you read the memo? No. Why? It was 10 pages long. But he shouldn't say that. He should say I'm a stable genius and that I'm like a smart person. Okay, so tick, 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 tick. So he gets rid of Kelly. Who's he going to bring in? Brace for impact. According to the sources, Trump speaks regularly by phone with a quote unquote brain trust that includes Sean Hannity. Oh, this is a doozy. Jason Miller, Corey Lewandowski. Reince Priebus is back. Look at that. And RNC chairwoman Ronna Romney McDaniel. Okay. He's like, she sounds delicious. I like Ronald McDonald a lot. Bring her in. Okay, that's good. I'm going to bring Reince back in. I don't know why. I kind of miss the old fella. I like to make fun of how short he was, which is what he used to do when he was there. Okay. That's a murderer's row of idiots. So you get rid of John Kelly, you bring in those guys. Tick, 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 tick. Look, we had the stock market go down significantly on Monday, Friday and Monday. It's come back up a little bit today, but still overall an absolute mess. Overinflated, just like we told you. We've got his poll numbers are not. They peaked at 42%, which is a terrible number. I guarantee. And then the poll after that, it already started to go back down. You've got Trump now going to try to respond to troubles that he's having. If they get rid of Kelly and they bring in they bring the old circus back into town, the level of instability we're going to have is going to be unprecedented. If you thought 2017 was bad, wait till you get a load of 2018 if these are the guys inside the tent. The minute Kelly's fired, if he's fired, set the timer because Trump's presidency is in a world of trouble and it will just only get worse from there. It'll be a vicious cycle that spirals down. Okay, I know, I can see the trolls now. Oh yeah, right, you said that before, Trump's awesome, you're gonna see it in the news. If they get rid of him soon, he ain't gonna make it to 2018. I've been saying that from the beginning, to be fair, okay? And I mean the 2018 elections, and he ain't going to. Let's see what happens. Okay. Now on to how his own folks react to Donald Trump, and that is a completely different story, his own fans, okay? So the Republicans have been attacking the FBI at the behest of Donald Trump for quite some time now. Why? Because the FBI is investigating Donald Trump's connections to Russia. Now, if you didn't do it, I've got to say, again, I'm not sure why you'd be on the attack and trying to rip our law enforcement agencies down. It sounds like you're against the rule of law and against cops. The FBI are the top cops in the country. But one of the reasons that they do it, of course, is to poison the well against Robert Mueller. So they want to say, oh, the leadership is wrong, and they had all these connections to Mueller, and we got to fire the special counsel. Now, in order to help do that, Devin Nunes, who worked on Trump's transition, wrote a partisan memo as part of the House Intelligence Committee. They released it publicly, and it was a total dud. And everybody who looked at it said, yeah, but you omitted huge parts of the story. A lot of this stuff is misleading. It doesn't tell us anything we didn't know before. So they had hyped it up beyond all reason, as you're about to see in a second. And it turns out there really wasn't much there at all, as we told you on this program. So was it a mistake to hype it up that much? And the conventional wisdom right now is yes. Oh, what a bunch of clowns, they hyped it up and then it fell flat. I think that conventional wisdom is wrong. I think it did serve the purpose that it was intended for. Now, I'm going to show you how much they hyped it up, how over the top it was. Now, remember, after it was released, even other Republicans, including Trey Gowdy, who Nunes said knew more about the intelligence than he did, came out and said, no, this doesn't prove that there was no Russian connections. I support Mueller 100%. So all of this was wrong, but nonetheless, watch it and I'll tell you the effect that it did have.
Requirement to determine the full extent to which the FBI, the DOJ, and special counsel's office have been compromised and corrupted.
We know how the deep state has been trying to undermine Donald Trump from the days he was a candidate.
Sean, this is bigger than anything anybody can imagine.
When you say that this makes Watergate like stealing a Snickers bar.
This is 100 times bigger. This is our government spying on political adversaries.
The Department of Justice and the FBI are corrupt. They're crooked.
There's so much smoke here. There's so much suspicion.
Now the evidence has been mounting and mounting and mounting, and one smoking gun after another. It's incontrovertible at this point.
Here are two bureau agents talking about a secret society. I don't have a clue what they're talking about.
Secret society within the Justice Department and the FBI.
I don't know whether one existed, but you know what, Aaron? It's not my responsibility to prove that.
What this is all about is further evidence of corruption, more than bias, but corruption at the highest levels of the FBI and that secret society.
So we know the deep state can mobilize if they want to, and they can create false narratives that everybody in the media believes.
We are dealing with the world's premier investigative agency here, and people that come forward to us fear retaliation.
It's a scary night, but there's going to be a lot of news all week long. We are part of a small group of people.
Now, at one point they said it was, 100 or 1,000 times worse than Watergate. If you missed it, Sebastian Gorka said it was 100 times worse than what led to the American Revolution. Now, how's that for hype? Now, as I told you, other Republicans came out afterwards, oops, yeah, it didn't have much in it. But get a load of this. The HuffPost reporting a new poll that came out, of those Trump voters who've heard about the memo, 79% think it shows that the FBI did something wrong, and more than 80% describe the memo's contents as accurate. Now, if you ask that 80%, did you read the memo? I guarantee you that the percentage who read it is in the ballpark of 0.00008, right? And nobody read that memo. They're like, no, I'm positive it's accurate though. And they heard about it. Gee, I wonder where they heard about it. We'll get to more on that in a second. And they never heard that it was inaccurate. That message never reached them. I'll give you some facts on that in a second as well. So now nearly 3/4 of Trump voters, 74%, say the FBI is biased against the president, according to a new HuffPost YouGov survey. Now, let's go further. Just under 1/3 of Trump voters say they have even a fair amount of trust in the FBI, while 64% say they don't trust the FBI very much or at all. So he got most of his followers, at least 3/4, to believe that the FBI is working against them, and it's unfair, they're biased. And then he undermined trust in the FBI among Republican voters almost completely. Now nearly 2/3 of Trump voters say they don't even trust the FBI for anything. Look at how quick that worked. In essence, mission accomplished. He was never going to convince Democrats, and he might convince some independents, but overall, he wanted his base to think, oh, they're coming to get us unfairly, and they do believe that. And Trump, of course, finished the propaganda circuit by saying, after the memo was released by the way, Donald Trump, that it, quote, totally vindicates Trump, calling himself Trump in the third person, of course. Now, it did no such thing, but it doesn't matter. All you have to do is keep lying about it. In fact, the last Republican president explained this phenomenon nearly perfectly.
Third time I've said that. I'll probably say it 3 more times. See, in my line of work, you got to keep repeating things over and over and over again for the truth to sink in, to kind of catapult the propaganda.
So somebody told Bush that that's how we catapult the propaganda. He was supposed to stop the sentence at for the truth to set in, but he couldn't help himself and accidentally actually catapulted the truth in that last part of the sentence, which was, this is how we do propaganda. We just keep on repeating it. Now, they explained that Hillary Clinton voters and independents did not see the memo or the FBI in the same light, and that they still support the FBI overwhelmingly. Now, here comes the interesting part. The two groups are also, meaning the Trump voters and the people who didn't vote for Trump, are also getting their news about the memo from distinctly different places. A majority of both Clinton and Trump voters who followed the story say that cable TV was among the sources they relied on. But while those Clinton voters tuned in largely to CNN and MSNBC, the Trump voters who watched cable coverage of the story were overwhelmingly likely to say they'd seen it on Fox News. So that is why we have the different realities that we do in America today, where one side gets some degree of facts from traditional media, and you might say with bias loaded in, and everybody's got a different version of what that bias is. The other side has a completely different reality, detached from facts altogether. Did the memo actually prove that the FBI was trying to do a coup against the president or overthrow him or get him out of office? No, not remotely. But Fox News says it anyway, and that becomes the reality for the Trump voters who are not even watching anything else. They're not reading anything else. They're getting all their news from Fox, so they think that's what's true. So that leads us to this divided nation. HuffPost explaining here, overall, that leaves 35% of Americans who've heard about the memo saying that it shows the FBI did something wrong, and another 34% that it vindicates the Bureau, with the rest unsure. And that's kind of where we have it. A third of the country says Trump is right, facts be damned. A third of the country says Trump is wrong. By the way, that 34% saying that the memo vindicates the Bureau makes no sense either. The memo is damning of the Bureau. The memo's wrong, that's a different question, but it doesn't necessarily vindicate the Bureau. So now you got another third that says, no, Trump is always wrong, and another third sitting in the middle confused, and somewhat rightfully so. Look, when you have one side that job is to just do propaganda because the facts do not suit their purposes, and they attack all the different sources that bring you news, media, professors, schools, scientists, and they replace it with their propaganda that they are catapulting. You set up a dangerous situation where we have a country that lives in two different realities, and that's where we are today. So the FBI, if they come out, the special counsel, with overwhelming evidence that the president has broken a law, or maybe several laws, 1/3 of the country will never believe them. They won't even bother to look at the facts. They won't read it. They'll tune into Fox News, and whatever Fox News tells them, and whatever Donald Trump says on his Twitter account, they will repeat. So that sets us up for a crisis. Let's hope it doesn't happen. Let's hope cooler minds prevail at some point if there is a reckoning. Let's hope that somebody can talk Donald Trump into settling this amicably. As I say that sentence out loud, it certainly doesn't appear that that'll happen. And by the way, it's also possible that Mueller doesn't get him, in which case, yes, then he'll continue on with the rest of his term, and the reckoning will come in an election, and which is great, and they should. And let's hope those elections are fair and honest, and that they don't pull two different realities on an election. But as things stand now, if Mueller does find evidence of a crime, about 35% of the country will likely never believe it. That's pretty dangerous. All right, we got to take a break. Afterwards, like I told you, we're going to talk a little bit about the stock market collapse and the Republicans' hilarious excuse for it, and a prosperity preacher spreading disease. Amusingly so, but still problematic. We'll show you.
A progressive future requires a different kind of financial industry. I'm Joe Sandberg. I'm co-founder of Aspiration.com, an online financial firm you can fall in love with. The American financial industry came to serve itself and profit. I believe in a different path for business. Business should be about serving people, and that profit is a byproduct of serving people well. Aspiration.com is about our customers and our movement. We use what we call pay what's fair. You, as the customer, have the power to choose your fee. We trust you that if we do a good job for you, you'll choose to pay us. 10% of the fees that you choose to pay we give to charity. Many of you are passionate about the environment and reversing the effects of climate change, but many of you also may be banking at a big institution that funds things like Dakota Access. It made clear what's inherently broken about Wells Fargo and so much of the financial industry. These organizations are obsessed not with serving people, but with serving themselves and their profit. You can stop Doppel by taking your money out of banks that fund Doppel and put your money into financial institutions like Aspiration.com. You don't have to sacrifice your values to do well financially. And that's why our motto at Aspiration is do well, do good. We have a popular fossil fuel-free, firearm-free, private prison-free, sustainable investing fund at Aspiration called the Redwood Fund. And the minimum is just $100. The power and future is yours to determine. The choices you make with your money matter. And that's why we built Aspiration, because there's a different, better way to deliver both great banking and investing services that meet your needs and also match your values.
Back on the Young Turks, Gabby says, let me guess, they're trying to blame the stock market crash on Obama because that's Trump's only setting. Hold, Gabby, hold. Chris Duran says, will there be a party next year, Cenk? I would have loved to have come and see you guys, but I'm currently writing my thesis, coincidentally, about TYT in Toronto, so it was in the cards this year, sadly. Okay, you know what? Let me tell you about what we're going to do for you guys that can't be here in LA. So you know TYT is having our Sweet 16 party, and that is on February 15th. It's going to be here in LA. We're already sold out. The tickets are gone. But if you're a member, there's a couple different things that you can do. First of all, you can actually watch it live anywhere if you're a member. So we'll have cameras in there so the live audience can watch it and members can watch it. So in order to become a member, tytnetwork.com/join. And then once you are a member, if you want to watch any of our live events, go to tytnetwork.com/memberslive, and you'll be able to watch it on February 15th at 8 p.m. Pacific. It is going to be a little bit late for you guys on the East Coast. It's 11 o'clock Eastern. We're going to have a full show for you guys. All of our top hosts will be there. Jimmy Dore will do a comedy set. We'll do some political speeches, and we'll also go through all the fun things that we've done at the Young Turks in the last 16 years to the best of our ability. Now, members can also participate at the party by sending in your own videos. So you can figure out how to do that. Keep it to about 20 seconds because we want to show as many as possible. Go to tytnetwork.com/communications to do that, to submit your own video so you can be featured during the party. And then if you're a member and you've already bought a ticket, because you can't buy any more tickets, if you bought a ticket, there's two ways that you can upgrade. One, we're going to submit we're going to submit your names for people who bought tickets to a random lottery that we're going to do internally, and see if you get upgraded to VIP status. So that'll be cool. Get to meet and greet with the hosts and also participate in taking pictures, etc. Now, if you have a regular ticket, a general admission was just $10. You could also be you could be upgraded to VIP. If you already bought a VIP ticket, you can get an extra general admission ticket if you're a member. Now, if you're a member and you already bought a ticket, you don't have to do anything more, okay? But if you have bought a ticket and you're not a member, you could enter this lottery for those two perks if you upgrade to being a member. So tytnetwork.com/join to do that. Okay, I've got other stories to get to, so let me go forward on that. I hope you guys got all that. Let me just give you a couple of last tweets here. Nick says, please, for the love of God, Donald, you have to show Mueller how smart you are. I agree. And Santos D with a good question. We'll leave it at this. Hey, Cenk, could you clear something up? I thought talking to investigators wasn't optional. Can Trump legally refuse to talk to Mueller? No, it's not optional. He theoretically cannot refuse to talk to Mueller, but he can drag it out. So he can say, nope, I'm not going to do it. And then they'll bellyache. Oh, the investigation still hasn't wrapped up. Oh my God, what are they doing? This is outrageous. And they could do those kind of delay tactics. And of course, Fox News will blast that 24/7. They'll do a countdown on how long the investigation has taken and try to run out the clock. So those are among their options. All right, let's go over here and do more stories. Man, I'm running out of time. All right. Okay. Now, Republicans and Donald Trump had been bragging all over television, but mainly on Fox News and certainly on Sean Hannity's program, about how great the stock market's doing. And yes, you can tell that Donald Trump is awesome because the stock market is up. And then on Friday, it plunged significantly, lost 666 points. Then on Monday, things got worse. As The Hill explains, the Dow Jones Industrial Average fell more than 1,100 points on Monday, the largest one-day point loss in its history. So all the gains from this year were wiped out in 2 days. Today, it came back up a little bit, but has not recovered all those losses by a long shot. So overall, way down over the last 3 days that the market's been up, that the market's been in operation, I should say. So now we're gonna go to White House Deputy Secretary Hogan Gidley to try to explain, because Trump had been saying all along that he gets credit for all this. So what do you say now that the stock market is crashing?
Well, look, I mean, obviously the president did tout the stock market, but I would hardly say that he focused on it.
You would hardly say that Trump focused on it. Well, all right, well, let's find out. Here's Donald Trump himself.
We broke a very, very big barrier, 25,000. And there were those that say we wouldn't break 25,000 by the end of the 8th year.
Stock market is up very, very big today. The stock market is way up again today.
Record stock market prices. The stock market is smashing one record after another.
I think they'll be continued to set.
Stock market has smashed one record after another. Stock market is up almost 50% since my election. We've set 84 records since my election.
since my election. We're setting a record literally all the time in just this short period of time.
Had the Democrat won, I believe you would have been down 50%.
He's hardly focused on it at all, though. I can give you tweets all night long. I'll just give you a couple. I like this one I'm about to read to you because it was before he even took office. It was after his election in December, but he's not even president yet, and he tweeted out, "The world was gloomy before I won. There was no hope. Now the market is up nearly 10%, and Christmas spending is over $1 trillion." All because of Donald, of course. Now we've shown you the stock market charts before. No, the stock market boomed under Obama. And you could say, hey, you know what, wages didn't, and that's not a good indication of the actual economy, and I would agree with you. But if you're talking about the stock market, it went way up under Obama. The world was not gloomy before Donald Trump won. It does seem a little gloomy, though, for the stock market these last couple of days. All right, he also had tweeted out, the fake news media barely mentions the fact that the stock market hit just another new record and that business in the US is booming, but the people know. Can you imagine if O was president and had these numbers? Would be the biggest story on earth. Down now over 25,000. Hardly focuses on it, though. Stock market, one name so. All right, one last one. Down goes from 18,589 on November 9th, 2016. By the way, do you want to say what it was before Obama took office? Because Bush had absolutely decimated it. Anyway, it goes to 25,075 today for a new all-time record, jumped 1,000 points in the last 5 weeks. Record fastest 1,000 point move in history. This is all about the Make America Great Again agenda. Jobs, jobs, jobs. $6 trillion in value created. Fastest 1,000 point move in history, he said, about how the stock market had moved up. The Dow Jones had moved up 1,000 points in a year. Well, as I just told you, it moved down 1,100 points in one day. So that would be a little faster. What do Republicans do? They take stable markets and stable economies and they pump them up to get the very top even richer and richer. So sub-house market under Bush, and they did derivative after derivative. They deregulated the banks, pumped it up, grew a bubble, and it burst. Under Trump, massive tax cuts for the rich, and all the deregulation of the banks again. Pump it up, the bubble gets higher and then bursts. It happens every time. And so that is why I was telling you guys that it was gonna happen this time as well. And Trump was bragging about how much value was created. Well, value lost on Friday and Monday. The Dow fell, on Monday alone, it fell 1,175 points, a 4.6% decline. Since January 26, 7.8% drop. So that represents nearly $2 trillion of paper wealth gone. So what happened to all the bragging? Well, I'm gonna come back to Hogan Gidley, the deputy press secretary for Trump, because he's going to end the interview on an incredibly ironic statement. Watch.
But no question, the president was involved and responsible for the increase in the stock market, but also in the overall economy, which, as you know, has been growing at anemic levels under the Barack Obama administration.
First of all, that last part is untrue. But what? So he deserves credit for the rise up throughout the year because he was very involved in that. But the crash, no, then he became uninvolved and had nothing to do with that at all. They say all this with a straight face. Unreal. Okay, now, one more thing about the stock market rise and fall. So let's go to the next, thank you. So Donald Trump tried to take credit over and over again for the stock market increases, breaking records, he said. And he said, oh my God, it's up by 1,000 points in 1 year. It's the fastest rise ever. The economy is booming because of me. Sean Hannity and his buddies on Fox News backed that up and bragged about it to no end. And then the stock market crashed, as it almost always does under Republican presidents, because they overinflate what the top 1% gets, and it creates a bubble. So they lost 1,175 points in the Dow on Monday alone. Today it has bounced back up a little bit, bouncing back up, I think about 579 points by the time that it closed. So getting almost Friday's losses back, which was 666 points, but still over 1,000-point loss on Monday unaccounted for. Overall, about 1,200 point drop, which is more than what Trump had bragged about in its increase over a year. So how is Sean Hannity going to handle this uncomfortable, unfortunate news? Well, he's got a great idea. It turns out it was someone else's fault. You'll never guess who. Let's watch.
Because the Obama economy was so weak all of these years, we had just artificially cheap money. Now, what's cheap money? Cheap money is when you can borrow at ridiculously low rates. The era of cheap money at some point has to come to an end. And the government is the Fed has artificially kept the price of money down and the price of borrowing down. And now that's going to come to an end. And in many ways, it represents, Ashley Webster is the name. In many ways, it's a sign of the strength of the economy more than anything else. I'll give you an example of this. It looks like, Wall Street hit their bump today, but we could be on the verge of long expected correction. 10% is normal. So I think the underpinnings of the economy are so strong now that the adjustment is coming, because I think a lot of people understand that cheap money is no longer going to be available.
Look, I like to decipher these things for you, so I'll translate. That equates to So let's get this right. The stock market crashes under President Bush. It does nothing but rise under Obama. Somehow that is weak numbers under Obama. When the stock market rises under Obama, that shows a weak economy. Now, in his first year in office, the stock market continues to rise under Trump. That's good, according to Hannity. And then it crashes. And the crash is because of Obama. Why? I don't know. Well, they had this artificially cheap money. Okay, that's fair enough. And I think that Obama and Geithner and Summers and all those guys were printing way too much money at the Fed, but so did Trump. Trump didn't change any of that. So they continued those same policies, and they all pumped that market all the way up until it was a bubble. So look, I'm not a partisan in that sense. I blamed Obama for a number of things that he did that I thought were not the right economic principles, including bailing out the banks, which the Republicans agreed to. I think that the Fed doing quantitative easing over and over and keeping interest rates too low was problematic. I thought it was going to create a bubble. But you can't say that Trump didn't do the same exact things. He did them and then added a giant tax cut for the rich and for corporations, which they used to do stock buybacks, which overinflated the market even more. How is that crash then only Obama's fault, but not Trump's fault? But if that twist in logic wasn't crazy enough, he then adds that the crash is actually a sign of how well the economy is doing now. What in the world? Okay, I can't even figure out how he jumped from that point A to point B on that one. So somehow the market rising under Trump is great, rising under Obama is bad, crashing under Trump is Obama's fault, but is actually a good thing for Trump. What? I feel like all of Fox News segments should be followed by someone going, what? I have a good candidate for who that might be. Okay, I gotta take another break. All right, when we come back, I told you the prosperity preacher is spreading disease. I will show you that, and we got so much more news for you guys. All right, come right back. You're gonna love the show. Go, go, go. All right, back on the Young Turks. Woke Poppy says, I tried to buy a ticket for the TYT party, but it wouldn't let me. When I tried again, it was sold out. Someone help. Sorry, there's no help coming. It is sold out, period. I tried to warn you. Edwin, didn't I try to warn them? I said I was, I wasn't overhyping it. I said they were going to sell out, and it did. On the other hand, you can watch if you're a member. So no more tickets for live appearances, except if you're a member. Either now, if you bought a ticket and you're already a member, or become a member, by Monday we're going to do a lottery for upgrades, and you might be able to bring a friend. So either way, tytnetwork.com/join to become a member to watch it anywhere. Vulturemax says, if Obama's economy hadn't been so damn stable for all those years, we wouldn't have panicked this week and jumped out of the world's most expensive game of chicken. So it's hence obviously Obama's fault. And I gotta go, so I can't read the rest of the tweets. But I forgot to mention in the last segment, and Vulturemax, thank you for reminding me. If you follow Hannity's line of logic, it's Obama's fault that the market crashed, but after the crash will be stronger. Well, then shouldn't he be thanking Obama? Because it was Obama who made it crash, which makes it stronger. God, they're just such clowns over there in Fox News. All right, let's keep going. I got to tell you the other stories, okay? TYT investigates with another breaking news story about Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar. He has some conflicts of interest that TYT investigates has reported on earlier. He, of course, worked for Eli Lilly, which is a huge drug company. Azar coming in had promised that he was going to lower drug prices. In reality, at his former company, he had just counseled to shift drug prices onto employees rather than actually lowering them. So that was an earlier story that TYT Investigates broke. Now let's go to this one by Jonathan Larson. First, he explains what Azar talked about during the confirmation. In his January 9th Senate confirmation hearing, Azar dismissed the notion that he wanted to impose work requirements on able-bodied adults. So he's saying, look, if you're talking about Medicaid, don't worry, we're not going to put in any conditions that people have to work. If you're sick, you're going to get the coverage. We're not going to go and test you to see if you're doing X, Y, and Z before you get the coverage because you're sick after all, right? Interesting. All right, well, in May 2017, Indiana asked the agency to let the state impose work requirements on its Medicaid beneficiaries. Azar traveled on Friday to Indiana, announced the approval for the waiver. What happened? I thought you weren't going to put restrictions on Medicaid and put work requirements in. I mean, his confirmation hearings were not years ago. They were on January 9th. He said, I'm not going to do that. Then he comes in, goes, of course I'm going to do that. What kind of an idiot would believe a Trump nominee? So, look, I'm putting my opinion into it. You can read the article for yourself. Down below, we'll have the link in the description box on YouTube if you're watching there, or in the comment section on Facebook. TYT Investigates does objective reporting, and they bother to follow up on stories that no one else is following up on. So he's only 4 days, I should say, into being the Health and Human Services Secretary, and immediately he has violated his pledge to not impose work requirements on Medicaid. So now more on why he might have approved this waiver request from Indiana. Azar, the former head of Eli Lilly's US subsidiary, sat on the HMS board of directors from October 2016 through November 2017, when President Trump nominated him to run Health and Human Services. HMS was that company that he was on the board of. Well, they might have a dog in this fight. First, let me give you the financial implications potentially for Azar. At the time Azar stepped down from the company HMS, he reported having between $115,000 and $300,000 worth of HMS stock and stock options. So now, when TYT Investigates asked Health and Human Services, they say, no, he's already sold that stock, he's divested himself. Now, we've heard that before from the Trump administration. Come to find out later that wasn't necessarily the case. But in this case, they say that he did. But remember the revolving door. You work for one company, and then you go into a government office, you do a world of favors for that company, you come out of government service, and then you work for that same company or another company in that industry, or as their lobbyist, and you get paid millions of dollars. That's usually how this game is played. So, but let's be fair. Does HMS have anything at stake here if Indiana is granted that waiver and all of a sudden there's a new requirement to get Medicaid? Well, Indiana's Medicaid website named HMS as a subcontractor that audits Medicaid payments. The contract took effect last summer and lasts through June of 2021. It does not name HMS, but says the audit subcontractor will receive 13% of recovered funds as compensation. So if you're eliminated from getting Medicaid because you didn't meet their new work requirements, HMS goes to recover that money, or subcontractors like HMS, and they are listed as one of the subcontractors, and they get to keep 13% of the money that they recovered from you. Like, give me that money back from money you got because you were sick. So they'll chase you down and then take part of the proceeds. HMS has lobbied to have other states do this as well, and they would directly benefit from those decisions. So yet another Trump nominee helping one of his former companies gain more financially from the decisions that he is making. Look, TYT Investigates points out the facts. My opinion will not be surprising that I am adding on top of the story, which is that they are not getting rid of the swamp. They're building the swamp. They're adding to the swamp. Guys like Alex Azar are the swamp. So of course he's going to do favors for his former company because the entire administration is built on the premise of corruption. And here it is, another case where that corruption is exposed. Okay, now let's go to the story that I've been promising you about prosperity preachers. Now I've been telling you about prosperity preachers for a while on the show. There's Creflo Dollar, there's Kenneth Copeland, and now we get to Kenneth Copeland's wife, Gloria Copeland. She's going to step in to tell us what we should do during flu season. God help us all, maybe in this case literally. So first, let me give you the context of flu season, and then I'll go to Copeland's clip here. Nearly 12,000 people have been hospitalized with confirmed cases of flu, and an increase of 3,000 in just 1 week, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The latest report for the week ending January 20th shows the rate of people seeking care now rivals that of swine flu pandemic of 2009. So we're at pandemic levels, so you should be careful. A lot of people die from this, including children. I'll have those stats for you in a little bit as well. Now, is that the direction that these preachers are going to go? No. Gloria Copeland is going to go in a completely different direction. Watch.
Listen, partners, we don't have a flu season. We've got a duck season, a deer season, but we don't have a flu season. And don't receive it when somebody threatens you with everybody's getting the flu. We've already had our shot. He bore our sicknesses and carried our diseases. That's what we stand on. And by his stripes, we were healed. If you've already got the flu, I'm going to pray for you right now. Father, I pray for every person that has symptoms of flu. I'm asking you, Lord, by your supernatural power, to heal them now from the top of their head to the soles of their feet. Flu, I bind you off of the people in the name of Jesus. Jesus himself gave us the flu shot. He redeemed us from the curse of flu. And we receive it and we take it, and we are healed by his stripes. Amen.
Except that you are not. Jesus didn't give you a flu shot. Your doctor's supposed to do that. None of that is true. That's why 12,000 people have been hospitalized. A lot more are sick. But there's 12,000 people in the hospital. What happened? I thought you cured them all. I thought Jesus cured them 2,000 years ago when he took on their wounds. All of this is preposterous mythology. It would be the same if she came out there and said, oh no, it's okay, because Apollo already talked to Athena and they have a deal that they gave you the flu shot and you have been cured. None of that is true. Okay, so with tens of thousands of patients flocking to hospitals and at least 37 children dead, this year's flu season is shaping up to be the worst in nearly a decade, and it's not over yet. So the 37 kids that died, that was somehow part of Jesus' plan? It's a weird thing. It almost seems like you're blaming Jesus, because if it was Jesus who was supposed to protect them, then I guess he failed. Look, I'm not the one putting it on Jesus, you are. So did Jesus kill the kids? What happened? I thought he already died for their sins and their heels and their wounds. I don't know what sins the kids have, but they died. They got families who are heartbroken over it. And these clowns, you know that the Copeland family, they raised over $30 million for a private jet. I showed that to you a couple of weeks ago. They were exuberant about it. Kenneth Copeland going around doing a little jig like, we got the jet, thanks to Jesus. They keep scamming you and scamming you. And it's one thing when they rob you and you willingly give them your money so they can go around in private jets. One of the reasons they said they needed a private jet was they didn't want to go on a passenger airline with the rest of us, because they said it's a tube filled with demons. That's how they look at you. But they couldn't leave well enough alone. Now they're trying to get you to make sure that you don't take a shot so that you or your kids can get sick. Oh man, to say it is ungodly is an understatement. Now, on the other hand, our government's supposed to be protecting us. What's happening there? The CDC, which is in charge of public health and disease prevention, would see its budget cut by $1.2 billion, according to the Trump administration. That was a news story that came out last week. They're going to cut the CDC budget when we need it most. And here's Gloria Copeland with more clownish antics.
So get on the word, stay on the word, and if you say, well, I don't have any symptoms of the flu, well, great, that's the way it's supposed to be. Just keep saying that. I'll never have the flu. I'll never have the flu. Put words, inoculate yourself with the word of God. He himself bore my sicknesses, carried my diseases, and by his stripes I was healed. I am healed. And Jesus is Lord. Hallelujah.
Jesus Christ, man, literally. If anybody else did this, we would see them for the lunatics that they are. Put any other religion in. If there was a Muslim preacher out there going, oh, no, you don't need a flu shot. Allah already saved you from the flu shot. Muhammad saved you from the flu shot. Don't get a flu shot. Make sure your kids get sick. We'd say, what kind of a monster is that guy? Oh my God, that's Sharia law. Don't listen to him. If the Dalai Lama said, okay, namaste, don't take a flu shot, we'd say, okay, Dalai Lama, we love you, that you're for peace, but that's crazy talk. Again, Zeus, Apollo, the sun god of the Persians, it doesn't matter. They're not doctors. None of that is true. Now we go to Mediaite. On a related note, a mega church that the televangelist founded with her husband, Kenneth Copeland, was the site of a severe measles outbreak in 2013. The cause? A lack of vaccinations among its flock. Don't listen to these scam artists. They are literally dangerous to your health. Okay. I'm out of time. All right, we got a great second hour coming up for you guys, and some more political stories there as well. So come right back and we'll talk to you over there. That was the worst tease I've ever done. All right, anyway, I'll see you in a minute.
and by his stripes I was healed. I am healed. And Jesus is Lord. Hallelujah.
All right, back on the Young Turks, Cenk and Anna with you guys. So, one of the problems with the Copelands is, I'll read you a tweet first. Chris says, is it just me or does every prosperity preacher have the most stereotypically Southern drawl ever? Yes, the only thing missing is at the end of it, but look, among the different problems that they create, one of them is that they give all other religious figures a bad name. And so listen to any Martin Luther King speech. It talks about Jesus nonstop, but talks about him in a positive light where he's gonna lift you up and he's not gonna rob you of your money to buy a private jet. He's not gonna tell you that, hey, don't worry about this flu shot, I already gave you the flu shot. He's not gonna lie to you, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's some good preachers out there, but man, the right wing has perverted it in a way that is unfortunate. So now when you hear, you start, unfortunately, because these guys run for the hills.
Real quick, isn't it true though of pretty much everything? I mean, it's always the worst in every organization, every business, every industry that gets the most attention, and then it basically brings an entire profession down,
Unfortunately, the squeaky wheels do get the grease.
Always.
And squeaky and corrupt and bad intent and all that stuff. All right, last couple of tweets for you. Trey Beatty says, thank you for the folks at TYT Investigates for the great work breaking and following up on stories that the mainstream media isn't covering. Well, thank you, Trey. And thank you to you guys in the audience because you made that possible. You're the guys who funded TYT Investigates, so that is what allows us to break those stories on issues of policy where people are not paying attention. And Jashiro says, Cenk, I casually made my roommate listen to you guys. He's now a member of TYT. That's awesome. Thank you so much, Jashiro. We really appreciate that. Speaking of members of the day are James Underwood and Sheila Campbell. And today in the post game, Anna, I am going to give you a bomb. BALM. A bomb to cure the...
Like lip balm?
Like a bomb that heals.
Oh, okay.
To make the wounded whole.
Okay, all right.
So as Martin Luther King would say. Because I'm going to read you conversion therapy stories from TYT.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Conversion therapy has a negative
I know, but
connotation.
this is from conservative to progressive.
Okay.
And you're gonna love these stories.
Okay, sounds good.
TYTnetwork.com/join to hear all that. All right, Anna, what's next?
Democrats in the House Judiciary Committee are investigating FEMA and its inability to grant contracts to companies that are doing that could do a decent job in providing disaster relief to the victims of Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico. Now, the New York Times wrote this explosive piece indicating that FEMA has granted contracts to groups of people and companies that are shady and questionable to say the least. In fact, it profiles the story of Tribute Contracting LLC, which was given the task of delivering 30 million meals to Puerto Ricans who are suffering from the ramifications of that storm. Well, they failed to deliver those meals. In fact, they only delivered about tens of thousands of them before their contract was terminated. So the Department of Homeland Security has doled out more than $1 billion in contracts related to Hurricane Maria. So it's quite a bit of money, but a lot of those contracts went to companies that haven't done a sufficient job in fulfilling their role. FEMA tapped Tiffany Brown, an Atlanta entrepreneur with no experience in large-scale disaster relief, and at least 5 canceled government contracts in her past. FEMA awarded her $156 million for the job of delivering these 30 million meals. Now, you might be wondering, okay, what are these other government contracts that got canceled, and why would FEMA give her a contract if she's had problems with the federal government in the past? Well, 4 cancellations involved the federal prison system, which found that Tribute failed to deliver meat, bakery, cereal, and other food products to various correctional institutions. A fifth termination involved the government publishing office, which terminated a contract for 3,000 tote bags after Tribute failed to print the Marine Corps logo on both sides of the bags. By the way, the government publishing office also noted that she never sent anything on time. She was always late. Now,
I figured it out, Anna.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, why give her another contract too? Well, if your job is to destroy the government, she's actually a perfect candidate. Because remember, Scott Pruitt sued the EPA 14 times to try to destroy the EPA's regulations. They put him in charge of the EPA. Department of Energy, Rick Perry said we should eliminate it. Comes the Secretary of Energy, on and on and on. So here's another person. Oh, we want to deliver food? No, we don't. We want to destroy government, so let's hire the most incompetent person we can to do it.
So look, I don't blame you for thinking that way, because we know that Republicans, and Republicans are in charge right now, hate government programs that aid Americans. They don't want our taxpayer money going toward helping our fellow Americans. But this type of behavior happened during the Obama administration quite a bit. So some of these contracts do date back to Obama's administration. Now, just quickly going back to the issue of delivering meals to Puerto Ricans, remember, her company, by the way, she is the only person in that company. All she does is hire subcontractors to do the work. Was supposed to deliver the 30 million meals, but by the time 18.5 million meals were due, Tribute had only delivered 50,000. The food had been packaged separately from the pouches used to heat them. FEMA's solicitation required self-heating meals. So once they realized that they weren't packaged the way that they were supposed to be, FEMA was upset, and so they sent her a notice indicating that they are going to terminate the contract. The notice indicated, do not ship another meal, your contract is terminated. This is a logistical nightmare. So look, it's just interesting because, again, she had 5 previous contracts that had been terminated. Yes, they were other government organizations. It wasn't FEMA. But shouldn't they communicate with one another and understand that, hey, maybe this isn't the right person to hire to do this job, especially to the tune of millions of dollars, $156 million.
Yeah. So, look, the government needs to do this job because you're not going to get people, companies set up to just to do charity. Companies are set up to do for-profit stuff. Now, government can contract out to companies, obviously, but this is what is part of the essential services of the government. Yes, it is frustrating that oftentimes the government has a bureaucracy that doesn't work. And if we were Republicans, I'd say, well, the reason she didn't do her job under Obama is because of Trump. That's what Hannity claimed today. The stock market crash under Trump was because of Obama.
Right.
Okay, but we're actually honest people. So no, it was terrible that she didn't deliver under Obama, but we already knew that. So why hire her again under Trump? So that is deeply frustrating. And it doesn't mean, by the way, that the government shouldn't do this. That if you are a victim of a hurricane and you need food, the government shouldn't come to your rescue. Small government, yeah, doesn't give you the answer. What we need to do is have government work better, and oftentimes it does, but in this case, it clearly did not.
So what I'm about to say is pure speculation, so I want to be clear about that. This is just where my mind is kind of going when it comes to these government contracts. We know that when it comes to government contracts given to defense contractors, it's because there are campaign donations involved behind the scenes. So I don't know, I haven't investigated this. As far as I know, I haven't found any investigation indicating that people like Tiffany Brown had contributed some campaign dollars to politicians, which then led to these contracts. But I do find it strange that she repeatedly gets these contracts and then fails to deliver.
Well, speaking of big government, small government, and what the government should do and shouldn't do, those defense contractors often build planes that cost us billions upon billions of dollars that never work, or ships likewise, and they're giant boondoggles. So if you say you don't like big government in that respect, I hear you, brother. And it's one thing when you absolutely need to feed people who are hungry, who are suffering from a natural disaster. It's another thing to build extra ships and planes we didn't need in the first place. So all the money that all those defense contractors pocketed, and a lot of those planes never went in the air in the first place. Now the Republican logic is, well, look at that. Now we're unsafe.
No.
Are we?
Now we're unsafe, and now we got to throw more money in defense spending.
Yeah. So look, the correct answer is not small government or big government. It is a government that is suited for the purposes that it is addressing and should be addressing. So this is a core function of government. We need to do it better, and we need to have the contractors picked. And I totally empathize with Anna's speculation on this story, because what have we seen in the past? It isn't about the size of the government, it's about who's doing the job. Why? Because oftentimes they gave donations to the politicians. So right or wrong, competent or incompetent, they're gonna get the contracts, which certainly applies to the defense contractors as well. And so that is the heart of the problem oftentimes. In this case, we know the symptom, which is that those poor people didn't get their food that they were supposed to. Maybe somebody will look into and figure out what was the root cause of the problem.
Right, and Democrats, again, in the House Judiciary Committee are investigating this to figure out what's going on. But I do want to leave you with one fascinating tidbit that just, perfectly sums up this story. In November, the Associated Press found that after Hurricane Maria, FEMA awarded more than $30 million in contracts for emergency tarps and plastic sheeting to a company that never delivered the needed supplies. So that's what's going on. Okay, let's move on to some pretty devastating news and our president's ridiculous response to it. On Sunday morning, there was a tragic death involving an NFL player by the name of Edwin Jackson. He was the Indianapolis Colts linebacker, and he was in an Uber at that time when a drunk driver unfortunately hit the car and he lost his life, and so did the individual driving the Uber. Now, CBS's This Morning has more on the story. Let's take a look at that, and then I'll give you Trump's reaction to it.
Around 4 o'clock Sunday morning in Indianapolis, Jackson and his Uber driver, Jeffrey Monroe, were killed. Their car was pulled over on the side of Interstate 70 because Jackson felt sick. Both of the men were outside of the vehicle when a black Ford F-150 truck plowed into them. The force of the impact threw one of the men into the center lane, where he was later accidentally struck by a state police vehicle.
He looked at me like a brother, just like I looked at him like a brother.
That's Jackson's roommate, Chad Boucher, who had gone out with him the night he was killed.
He actually did the right thing, and he took an Uber. He was making the right steps to get home safely and not put anybody else in harm's way.
The driver of the truck, Manuel Oriego Zavala, was arrested with a blood alcohol level nearly 3 times the legal limit. According to a police affidavit, the suspect used an alias and was in the country illegally. Investigators say he was deported to Guatemala in 2007 and again in 2009.
So he was deported twice, but he found his way back into the United States. He was undocumented, obviously, and drunk behind the wheel. He is in custody. Now, Trump used this as an opportunity to push his anti-immigration agenda. In a tweet, he said the following: "So disgraceful that a person illegally in our country killed Colts linebacker Edwin Jackson. This is just one of many such preventable tragedies. We must get the Dems to get tough on the border and with illegal immigration fast." So this is to be expected from Trump. He continuously makes the case that people who are in the country illegally are more likely to commit violent crimes and more likely to drive drunk. But the studies that have been done on this very issue prove otherwise, and we'll get into those details in just a moment. But it is a tragic story, and I'm devastated for Jackson's family.
So look, if you wanted to target any group, you could do it super easily, because there's thousands of homicides, for example, every year. There's thousands of drunk driving accidents every year. And so if you wanted to target Asians, for example, you could take examples of 3 drunk driving crashes, 5, 17 in the country easily, and just talk about it nonstop. Go, oh my God, and then this person was killed by an Asian driver. This person was killed by an Asian driver, until everybody's like, oh my God, what's going on with Asian drivers? Oh my God, this is an epidemic. But in reality, you could look at the numbers and say, wait, is there a disproportionate number of people being killed by Asian drunk drivers or Asian homicides or whatever it is that they're making up? I'm taking a random hypothetical. And the reality would be no, there is no epidemic, and it is not statistically different than anything else. In this case, let's find out. Let's go to the facts. Do undocumented immigrants create and commit more crime or not?
Right. So let's first go to data that we have from the census. So analysis of census data from 1980 to 2010 show that among men ages 18 to 49, immigrants were 1/2 to 1/5 as likely to be incarcerated as those born in the United States. So this talking point that we hear time and time again from the hard right is not true. They're not more likely to be violent criminals.
No, but it's worse than that. No, citizens are more likely to commit crimes, period. In that 18 to 49-year-old group, and that is a huge study from 1980 to 2010. So when you hear, oh, these immigrants are creating more crimes, it's just not true. The opposite is true. Now, that doesn't mean we should kick out all the citizens and leave only the undocumented people. That is preposterous. But understand that it is demagoguery, not backed up by the facts at all. It is the opposite of what is true.
So if you look at the general undocumented population in the United States, about 7% of the nation's population are non-citizens, while figures from the Justice Department show that about 5% of inmates in state and federal prisons are non-citizens, right? So if you take into account the general population of non-citizens in the country and then look at the number of inmates, you can tell that there's there's a bit of a gap there. And by the way, what are they in prison for? Well, about 1/3 of non-citizen federal inmates are serving time for immigration offenses, usually re-entering the country after being deported. So it's not like these are all, the people who are behind bars are all violent non-citizens. Oftentimes they just came back to the country after they had already been deported, and so they got, they were put in custody again.
So look, we've got 7% of the country is non-citizens, but only 5% of the prisoners are non-citizens. So they are, again, another fact showing that they are less likely to commit criminal acts. Now, a lot of them are minorities. We've shown you other studies that show that minorities are disproportionately targeted by police. So they're actually more likely to be in prison because of that fact, but still they're in prison less than the average citizen. And then on top of that, 1/3 of them are in prison just for being undocumented. If you took that away, it's even more disproportionate and gets you to about what the other study showed, that they're half as likely as an average American to commit a crime.
And what's interesting is that the Cato Institute, has investigated this. Cato Institute is by no means a progressive organization. They're libertarians, and they've looked at this issue. And one of the researchers with the Cato Institute said, it doesn't matter what I try to do with the numbers. No matter what, we come out with the same result. Non-citizens are not more likely or even as likely as US citizens to commit crimes. Now let's look at drunk driving specifically, because that's what this story, of course, has to do with. Now, as the percentage of inmates without papers rose in the United States population between 1990 and 2014, arrests for drugs and drunken driving dropped, and that's according to a study in the American Journal of Public Health. So we have more undocumented immigrants coming into the country, but if you look at the stats involving drunk driving, you see a significant drop. With every 1% increase in the proportion of undocumented immigrants in a population of 100,000, there were 42 fewer drunk driving arrests, 22 fewer drug arrests, and roughly 1 less drug overdose. Also, the number of undocumented immigrants living in the United States tripled from an estimated 3.5 million in 1990 to an estimated 10.9 million in 2014. At the same time, violent crime rates fell by half.
So if there was an epidemic of crime brought in by undocumented immigrants, crime would not have gone down, it would have gone up. Now, there are actually many factors as to why violent crime went down significantly in that time period. But the idea that immigrants brought in a wave of crime is preposterous, totally counterfactual. So when you see stories like this, it's easy to say, oh, okay, if we didn't have undocumented immigrants, well, then that wouldn't have happened and Edwin Jackson would be alive today. Well, Edwin Jackson would likely be alive today if that particular immigrant was not in the country or had not been drinking, etc. And it is a tragedy. But to use that tragedy for your own political purposes and demagogue over it, and to create a misleading anecdote, which is the opposite of what the reality in this country is, that's where the problem lies.
That is where the problem lies. And I also just want to make a quick point about how Trump absolutely loves to use certain people as props when it fits his political agenda. But as soon as it doesn't fit his political agenda, he'll turn around and call them sons of bitches. So that's something to also keep in mind whenever he has the audacity to tweet about a tragedy like this for political purposes.
Yeah, so if you're a black football player who took a knee during the national anthem, you're a son of a bitch who should be fired. But if you got run over by an undocumented immigrant, all of a sudden, he's like, oh my God, now I get to blame them too. Thank you for being my prop. And that makes this story particularly sick.
All right, let's take a break. When we come back, Uma Thurman speaks out against Harvey Weinstein and also shares an incredible and devastating video. And then later on, Ryan Seacrest clears his name after he was accused of mistreating an employee. Come right back.
Not been easy for me. I started off in Brooklyn. My father gave me a small loan of $1 million. All my life, I was told no.
He said I had small hands. They're not small. I never heard that one before.
Hey Dave, as you can probably see, Skype froze. Frozen crashed.
You know, I'm watching that documentary on the Vietnam War, and there was a TV journalist in the middle of some tiny little village in Vietnam doing live TV as the soldiers were burning the Vietnamese huts. And it didn't crash. And that was 1965, and he was in Vietnam.
Scott and Young Turks, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Lee Cox writes in, Republicans don't want taxpayer dollars spent on taxpayers.
That's right.
It's an excellent description. Chris Huck says, what is it with people named Brown screwing things up at FEMA? Is Trump going to say, you're doing a heck of a job, Brownie? Chris, excellent catch over there in Pittsburgh. I had forgotten that. I'd give you a t-shirt, but you already have plenty. Okay, so look, earlier in the show, I explained how members can watch the TYT party on February 15th. And then I tried to explain how they could upgrade their tickets. And I'm positive I butchered it. So, so we give it one more shot, okay?
Okay.
So, because I want you guys to understand it. So, anyway. So, our Sweet 16 birthday party for the Young Turks is going to be held live at a Coliseum here in LA. No, it's just a theater, but it's fun. Hundreds of tickets were sold already and were sold out. Now, if you remember, you could watch at home. So that's one of the benefits of membership. tytnetwork.com/join to become a member. But there's something else you get if you're a member. You can upgrade your tickets. So, like I said, it's sold out. So this is only for the people who have already bought tickets. So if you already bought a ticket and you're already a member, you don't have to do anything more. You'll be entered into two different fun secret lotteries. One is to, if you have a general admission ticket, to get upgraded to VIP where you could meet and greet the host and take pictures, etc. Or if you already bought a VIP ticket, well, you could get another friend in general admission. So we're gonna do those secret lotteries on Monday. Take our word for it, and some of you will get emails, hey, congrats, you got upgraded or you got an extra ticket. Now, if you already bought a ticket for the event, but you're not yet a member, don't worry. If you become a member now, sometime between now and Monday, you'll also get entered into the lottery. So you might have bought a $10 ticket, you become a member for $10, and you might get into the VIP section anyway, which was $100. That'd be a nice little win. And this is not a lottery where you're gonna have a 1 out of a 10 gazillion chance. You stand an okay chance of winning this. So it's a nice little extra perk that we wanted to give members. So tytnetwork.com/join to become a member. We'll do the lottery for you guys, so all you have to do is join between now and Monday and you'll be set. And then finally, to watch on the night of the February 15th, if you are a member, go to tytnetwork.com/members-live. All right, thank you guys. What's next?
All right. Actress Uma Thurman has opened up about the sexual misconduct that she faced while working with Harvey Weinstein. She was speaking to Maureen Dowd at the New York Times, and she said that, quote, Weinstein tried to shove himself on her. She also was quoted as saying that he did all kinds of unpleasant things, but he didn't actually put his back into it and force me. You're like an animal wriggling away like a lizard. I was doing anything I could to get the train back on the track, my track, not his track. So she had a story that was fairly similar to some of the other sexual assault allegations that came out previously involving Harvey Weinstein. But she also did talk about something that she was previously upset at Quentin Tarantino for, because in the filming of Kill Bill Volume 1, there was a stunt that she did while driving a car, and it led to a crash. And she feels that she shouldn't have done that stunt to begin with. But more importantly, there were producers behind the scenes that were trying to hide that crash and suppress information about it from the public. But Quentin Tarantino managed to obtain footage of that crash for her, and she's grateful to him for doing that. Now, she was quoted as saying, the circumstances of this event were negligent to the point of criminality. I do not believe, though, with malicious intent. So she doesn't think that Tarantino made her do the stunt with malicious intent, but there was negligence on his part because of how it all went down. It could have been prevented based on her perspective. Now, she posted the footage on Instagram. It's difficult to watch. We're gonna show it to you guys. So I wanted to make sure to give you some prior warning. Now, with that said, take a look. So there's the crash. She said that after that occurred, she suffered from a concussion and that she damaged her knees. She had to leave the hospital in a neck brace. It looks pretty bad.
She got a knock on her head there that she said was the size of an egg when it was all said and done. And like Anna pointed out, got a concussion. It was not necessarily supposed to be a stunt. She was only supposed to go 40 miles an hour on this road, but it took a curve that Tarantino did not expect. And that's what he's now beating himself up over, saying, I should have tested it before her.
Now, she had told the New York Times in regard to this crash, the seat wasn't screwed down properly. It was a sand road and it was not a straight road. Also, she added that Tarantino had instructed her to hit 40 miles per hour or else her hair wouldn't blow the right way.
And so what Tarantino is saying is now, just to be clear, he said, I wish we had gone one way on the road. I wish I had tested going the other way because it curved in a way that I didn't expect. I thought it was going to be straight, but it was sandy, and and apparently even going 40 miles per hour created an issue. And he said that it was the biggest regret of his career.
Yeah. And by the way, Uma Thurman also said that she's proud of him for doing the right thing and for his courage, because he was the one who managed to obtain that footage that she desperately wanted. And she wanted closure. This happened in 2003, and it's been on her mind ever since then. And so I'm really happy that she was able to share her story and what she went through. I'm happy that she was able to kind of shine a light on what she went through. And I'm glad that Tarantino took some responsibility for his part. And he talked about his own negligence in this case.
Yeah, he said it was one of the biggest regrets of my life, and and then sometimes when you are a director, you make mistakes and you learn from them. But this was a particularly horrendous mistake, as he called it. Now, the reason she's not mad at him is because he at least helped her to get the footage to prove her case. She's more mad at the producers, who she says have been covering it up ever since.
Yeah,
one of those producers was, of course, Weinstein.
Right, so let me give you info on the other producers that she called out. Thurman took film producers Lawrence Bender and E. Bennett Walsh, along with Weinstein, to task for allegedly covering up the crash, calling it unforgivable. She accused them of lying, and she says that they destroyed evidence and continued to lie about the permanent harm they caused and then chose to suppress.
Now, of course, as with all these stories, we always tell you there's two sides to each story, and we don't know. I mean, Weinstein is, that side of the story is clear, right? We know what we're getting with Weinstein. He's unreal. He apparently tried to sleep with almost every star that he was with. It blows me away. I'm amazed at what a horrible human being he was. For the other producers, on a contractual situation, I don't know if they've gotten to court yet. They haven't gotten to present their side. I'm just telling you that so you understand. They might have a different side to this story. Now, it was definitely a risk that they shouldn't have taken with one of the stars of the movie. And that's why they have stunt actors, but Tarantino acknowledges that. So
right. So I have to bring up the Roman Polanski thing because I looked into it and it's worth mentioning, if you're okay with that.
Sure.
Yeah, because I don't want the story to go too long, but it's worth mentioning that years ago, during an interview with Howard Stern, Quentin Tarantino was asked about his views on Roman Polanski. Now, Roman Polanski famously had an intimate relationship with, or notoriously, I should say, had an intimate relationship with a 13-year-old. He's no longer in the United States. He fled because he would face criminal charges here in the US. Howard Stern asked Tarantino about whether or not he considers that rape, and Tarantino said no. He said that it's statutory rape and it's different. And he also made it seem as though the 13-year-old was a consenting party and that she was a party girl. And those comments were not okay. So I think he should be called out on that stuff. And now that he's in the news due to this Uma Thurman story, people are remembering what he had told Howard Stern years ago.
Look, so Tarantino's comments on that are unacceptable. Robin Quivers at the time even pointed out, first of all, nothing was consensual. Even if you think that a 13-year-old can have any kind of relationship like that consensually with an adult, she wasn't. They had given her a lot of alcohol and drugs. I mean, that was wrong in 1,000 different ways. Robin was right to call out Tarantino at the time. People are right to call him out now. The only note I'll put on that is that it's weird that it's coming out at the same time. And so sometimes when someone is targeted for legal reasons, all of a sudden, all the stories that have ever been wrong about them come up at once. Mm-hmm. So I have no idea if that's what's going on here, but it's not right either way, but it is something very old that they're bringing up against Tarantino now.
Yeah.
So take it for what it's worth.
Right. I do hope that he says something about it, because look, sometimes people have opinions that they later change, and maybe hopefully at this point he realizes that those comments are unacceptable. A 13-year-old cannot consent. Like, let's just keep it real. That's a child.
It's not close. That's it's not anywhere near the border.
Right. Okay, moving on. Throughout this Me Too movement, there have been several men who have been accused of sexual misconduct or misconduct, involving their employees, and the men have denied it. One of those men was Ryan Seacrest, and there has been an internal investigation involving accusations that were lodged against him by a former stylist that worked with him 10 years ago. Now, he has been cleared of any wrongdoing. The independent investigation did not find any evidence to corroborate what the woman had accused him of, and he decided to speak out about his experience in a post for The Hollywood Reporter. I wanted to share it with you guys. He said, in November, I received a letter from a lawyer I received a letter from a lawyer representing a former show stylist. She claimed that I mistreated her more than a decade ago when we worked together. This arrived during an unprecedented public reckoning by women in our industry and beyond, courageously coming forward to share their stories. I was and am amazed at their bravery. Now, he says, I publicly denied the claims against me and agreed to participate in any inquiry the network deemed appropriate. On February 1st, I received notice that an independent third party found the claims to be unsubstantiated and that there was no evidence of wrongdoing on my part. And then he gets to something that I think a lot of people have wanted to articulate but have been fearful of doing so, right? So he says, most of us agree that the presumption of innocence is an important standard. We must find a way to ensure that everyone, the public, private, and public institutions, accusers and alleged accused, is given the opportunity for a swift and fair review.
So, look, unfortunately, oftentimes things break into two sides, right? So there's a side that is never believed the women in the first place for decades and decades and decades. Oh, they're just trying to get money. Oh, they're just trying to do this. They're trying to get famous. You name it, right? And then there's this side now, briefly, that said every woman is telling the truth. Well, that's obviously preposterous, right? And both sides are preposterous. The earlier point that lasted for decades is worse because it affected millions upon millions of women. And it kept them down, and it added injustice on top of the injustice they had already suffered. That people wouldn't believe them, basically carte blanche, like I don't care, I just don't believe you, period. I'm not even having a discussion about it.
Right.
So we shouldn't make the mistake of swinging the pendulum too far in the other direction, and that's what Ryan Seacrest is pointing out here. And so we've, I think, handled this right throughout. Of course, I think that because we're the ones who did it. Otherwise, we would have done something else. But it's not easy. And going all the way back to the woman with the mattress at Columbia, and we kept saying throughout, look, you got to be fair to all sides here. And for too long, women have not been believed on college campuses as well. On the other hand, the guy deserves a fair hearing, and you can't just smear somebody because you got an art project. And we've done it in almost every case that's come up here. Why? Because of course, sometimes the person didn't do it. And by the way, it is a progressive position to give people a chance. Yes, including men who've been accused of this.
Right, so I think that, and by the way, I myself am totally guilty of this, and I appreciate Ryan Seacrest, sharing his perspective because it's making me more aware. But I think sometimes people in general have a difficult time differentiating between believing someone, just straight up believing someone as soon as they accuse someone else of wrongdoing, or taking the accusation seriously and waiting to see the evidence and see, proof that that person actually did commit the wrongdoing that they're accused of.
Yeah, and I think that there's probably a little bit of a misunderstanding about the phrase, I believe the women. It's a little bit like Black Lives Matter. Some people interpret it as, then that means no other lives matter. No, that's preposterous. They're saying Black Lives Matter also, and it hasn't been treated that way. And when people say, I believe the women, I think that the overwhelming majority of them are saying women have not been believed in mass before. Now we do believe them, and we're willing to hear them out. It doesn't mean I believe every single woman and every single accusation and all men who have been accused are automatically guilty, right? And so if you're a liberal, you should care deeply about all those women who've been oppressed for all those years, who have now in a sense been liberated, and it's a wonderful moment. And you should also care to make sure that we're not throwing people under a bus and that we give them due process. And so, and it sounds like from what Seacrest is saying, he cares about the movement. He thinks it's a wonderful movement, but he didn't happen to do it. And now an investigation has proven him right about that.
One final story for you guys before we wrap up the main show today. The Supreme Court in Ohio has decided to uphold a state order that essentially led to the shutdown of the one and only abortion clinic left in the state. Now, in a 5-2 ruling, the High Court upheld a state order shuttering Capital Care of Toledo, the Northwest Ohio city's last abortion clinic, in a decision the facility is expected to appeal. So this case could make it to the Supreme Court. I don't know how well it would do in the Supreme Court considering our latest Supreme Court justice, but in this particular case, in the state of Ohio, justices say that the clinic violated a requirement because it no longer had a valid patient transfer agreement. This is something that we've seen in a lot of red states where Republican lawmakers will pass laws that essentially force these abortion clinics to have hospital admitting privileges. And if you're in a red state, oftentimes the hospitals themselves happen to be a little conservative, so they won't grant those contracts to the abortion clinics. Now, this is all done on purpose to shut down the clinics. Let's keep it real. The restrictions mandated that clinics' long required transfer agreements be with local hospitals and also barred public hospitals from providing them. So not only did the clinic have to have the hospital admitting privileges, they had to have the hospital admitting privileges under very strict and specific circumstances. To give you more information, after the Republican-controlled state legislature opted to outlaw transfer agreements with public hospitals, Capital Care went out of state negotiating its required agreement with the University of Michigan Health System in Ann Arbor. After they had done that, though, legislators responded by passing a new law, this one setting a mileage limit on emergency care that Ann Arbor, at 52 miles away, was too far to meet.
See, that last part's really important because that goes to show you that them saying, no, I just want it to be safe and healthy is a total lie. What does that have to do with a weird mileage limit on how far the hospital is? No, you passed that because you wanted to make sure that every single clinic in Ohio was shut down. This is a way of circumventing the law. The law is you're allowed to have an abortion in this country. Well, Republicans don't like that law. As usual, they're against the rule of law. So they pass other pieces of legislation circumventing what is considered the law of the land and doing something that the Supreme Court has ruled very clearly is unconstitutional. For the guys claiming to care about the Constitution and the rule of law, there they go again, making sure that they circumvent it. Look, the only thing I'll give them credit for is they fight. The Democrats almost never fight for their constituents, and the Republicans will do everything and anything to make sure that they win on an issue, even if it is crystal clear that what they're doing is in circumvention of the law and the Constitution.
Well, based on the Supreme Court ruling back in the 1970s regarding abortion, there shouldn't be any undue burden when it comes to obtaining an abortion. And if you don't have an abortion clinic in the state of Ohio because of the fact that they've made these ridiculous arbitrary laws that make no sense, well then it leads to an undue burden. So we'll see how this plays out.
There's no question they're doing it on purpose. There is one way to prevent it. Stop voting for Republicans. If you're pro-choice, if you're pro-life, yeah, okay, I get it why you're animated by them. But if you're pro-choice like 2/3 of the country, well, this is what Republicans are gonna do, and they're gonna try to take your rights away. They do it every time, and this is Kasich. He's supposed to be the moderate Republican. Does that look moderate to you? All right, we're out of time. Bye-bye. right, welcome to Rebel Headquarters. We got a couple of great guests for you guys on tonight's show. As always, they're progressive because this is a hub for progressives. By the way, if you've got a story you want us to cover, you got an event you want us to cover, a rally, a conference that progressives are putting together, or other progressive candidates, email us at rebelhq@tytnetwork.com. That's rebelhq@tytnetwork.com. All right, now joining me, a Democrat running in Virginia's 10th district. It's a very crowded race. There's 11 Democrats running there. The incumbent is very vulnerable, Barbara Comstock. And joining me is Deep Shran. Have I pronounced that right?
It's Deep Saran. That's
Saran.
right, deep like water. That's
Yes.
right. Hi, Jake, how are you?
Great, how you doing?
Good, thanks.
Okay, I found out earlier today that you actually went to law school with a very good friend of mine. So, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So I didn't know that before we booked you, but that's good. So you're running against Barbara Comstock. The reason she's vulnerable is because that district voted for Obama and Hillary Clinton, and in Hillary Clinton's case by 10 points. So first question for you is, what in the world is a conservative like Barbara Comstock doing as your congressperson?
I think that's the question everybody is asking. And after 2016, it was a real surprise. And I think the thing is, she is able to sell herself to constituents as a moderate, even though she votes with Trump about 96% of the time. I think 538.com said, in terms of her distance from her constituents, she's number 4 out of 435 representatives. So she's everywhere, and she is somehow plays herself as a moderate.
Well, I know how. It's through marketing, which is what the Republicans are best at. So apparently in a meeting today, she went out of her way to tell Trump that we don't need a government shutdown. So it's painted by all the press as Barbara Comstock stands up to Donald Trump. What you don't see in any of those stories is that she votes with him 96% of the time. So,
I think the media, sorry, Mike.
Go ahead, Deep.
I was gonna say, I think the media coverage is critical here. The same thing happened with her ACA non-vote. She waited until the last minute. She was gonna vote to repeal, but then the votes weren't there, and all the media reported is Comstock votes not to repeal ACA. You're exactly right. The media coverage is shallow, and as a result, she gets a bump. And I think in 2018, we're gonna see her do this throughout the cycle. She's gonna appear to distance herself from Trump.
Yes, and by the way, on the tax cuts for the rich, she voted yes. So,
absolutely.
Of course. So now we get to the question of which Democrat to support in this important race that is a very winnable race for the Democrats. And there are 11 of you. So why you and not the others?
There are actually 9, I think, but still, it's 2 years ago, the party had to beg somebody to run. Now there are 9 of us. I think there are a couple of things to keep in mind. I think first and foremost, you need somebody who can represent the whole district. I'm an educator, small business owner, son of immigrants in a very diverse district. So you need to be able to understand what everyone expects of you, not just Democrats, not just progressives. I think the second thing is this district can be a national leader. It can be a progressive leader. And we need a strong voice for core progressive values. And that's what I would be. And I think the final thing actually is something you mentioned at the end of your broadcast, which is the Republicans go to the mats on certain issues. They live and die on certain issues, and they defend all the way until the end. And I think that's what we need from districts like this one, somebody who's gonna really protect the most vulnerable, somebody who's gonna fight for justice and fairness, and somebody who's gonna really commit to a bottom-up approach to economic well-being in this country.
So Deep, you emphasize education almost more than any candidate that I've talked to in this cycle. Why? Why do you care so much about that particular issue?
Well, I know from experience, it's been the last 20 years. I know if you do education right, it can be transformative. It can be the engine of economic opportunity and social justice. I mean, every day in the classroom, I know if you give teachers freedom, you talk to students as equals, you commit to getting them involved in the process, you give them good content, they'll see it as important and it'll change their lives. And my view is working with teenagers is we can't get out of the way soon enough. I know the power of education, and I know that that applies in secondary school, if we can address higher ed affordability, if we can talk about adult education, it's transformative. And it is really the way to build a better nation and a better world.
So what is your experience in the education field?
So it's wide ranging. So of course I was a disgruntled student. I would sit in high school and wonder, why is it like this? Why won't they tell me what AP calculus is for? Why am I sitting here 7 hours a day? That's a great place to start as an educational designer, is being disappointed. But I went to college, had a great experience. I went to law school, got my doctorate in education. But throughout, I've always been a contrarian. So I've taught at the university level. I've taught at a public charter school in DC. I founded my own independent school. I work with public school teachers all the time on what they need to make education better. So I've kind of, I've taught teachers, I've taught students, I've started a school, I started an educational technology company because I think technology plays a role, but the teacher always has to be at the center. So I've really looked at this thing top to bottom from all sides. And I think ultimately being a classroom teacher is what's most important. You see what is possible. So, but you're running for US Congress. What would the federal government, or what could the federal government do for public education? I think that's a great question. The federal government accounts for about 10% of the total, $600+ billion we spend on K-12. The federal government needs to take a leadership role. It can promote innovation, for example, by just changing creating incentives to change the sorts of assessments we use. Instead of testing reading and math, why don't we test what kids really need in the 21st century? It can promote equity so that zip code does not determine outcome. And it can do a better job of really showing every student and every teacher that you have a clean, modern, safe space. So when I think about infrastructure spending, I think it should start with education. And so I think the federal government has a real opportunity to make sure that all American kids have a really amazing opportunity to be part of the political, social, and civic life in this country. But you said something in there that's a bit of a third rail in American politics, one that doesn't get talked about much at all. But if you go to a local area that is well-to-do and say, I'm not going to spend education funding based on your zip code, which is a affluent one, I'm going to do it so that poor kids and middle-class kids get the same amount of money, you're going to have war on your hands. You're exactly right. Voters vote with their feet. But I think what's critical, and that's where I think the federal government comes in, is it can be the difference maker. We don't need to meddle with local property tax calculations, but if the federal government can come in and make up the difference between Northern Virginia and Southwestern Virginia. Northern Virginia, 70% of the world's internet traffic goes through my county. Southwestern Virginia, you don't have broadband access. That's where the federal government can make a big difference without, as you say, kind of upsetting the folks who are investing in public education in their local communities. Okay, now how about other issues? What's your claim to being more progressive, if that's your claim, than some of the other people running in the primary? I think, again, I think we'll all define progressive differently, but ultimately I think what distinguishes progressives is we really are committed to outcomes that start from the bottom up. And so, I've worked in the public interest my whole life. I was a corporate lawyer for a few years, but have been working in education since the late 90s. And that is all about what is good for everyone. How do you create opportunity? So number one, committed to a bottom-up approach. At the same time, I'm a private sector guy. The private sector is amazing. And I think one of the things that those of us on the Democratic side or the progressive side really need to understand is, the private sector has a role in solving a lot of these problems. And I'm sensitive to that. But ultimately, my goal in Congress is to defend the most vulnerable. Otherwise, I'm a history teacher, and the same people always get hurt. Brown people get hurt, poor people get hurt, women get hurt. And so it's critical that to go into Congress from a district like mine, where there's no economic pressure and it's a diverse district, you have an opportunity to really show leadership to say, good government costs less than less government. The government can actually solve problems. And we need to push back against this fundamental assault on the fact that, the greatest thing we did, in terms of the human condition is to give the government an opportunity to work to get, to allow us to work together to solve problems. And so I would come to Congress with a real problem-solving orientation.
All right, Deep, one more thing. Has there been any reaction by the establishment to your candidacy? Supporting it, not supporting it?
I think, I think the Democratic Party has been good about an open primary, but it is clear that the parties are stuck in their old ways and they just look at money like it's some sort of horse race. And I think until the parties diminish the role of money in these campaigns and really talk about which candidate can talk to people in their district, has been in the district a long time, can mobilize grassroots energy, we're going to have problems. And so I think the party's been good with this open primary, but at the same time, I think it overemphasizes the role of money, which ultimately dilutes the voice of individual citizens.
All right, let me show everybody the links for Deep. If you're watching live, there they are, deepforcongress.com, etc. If you're watching on YouTube, the links will be in the description box below and on Facebook in the comment section. Deep, thank you so much for joining us at Rebel Headquarters. Appreciate it.
Thank you, and I'll be on Facebook Live right afterwards. If you want to go to my page at Deep for Congress, I'll be there to ask me anything. And thank you, Cenk, for the opportunity. Have a great evening.
All right, no problem. You too.
Thank you.
Look at that, taking advantage of technology. Makes sense. All right, we got another great guest for you guys coming up next in a deeply red district. What's his plan for winning? All right, back on Rebel Headquarters. Let's do it. Let's give you the next guest. Dan Cannon is running in Indiana's 9th district. He's a Just Democrat. He's been called one of the most fascinating midterm House candidates in the country. Whoa. He's running in a district that voted for Trump by 27 points. Dan Cannon, welcome to Rebel Headquarters.
Hi, Jake. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Dan, I want to talk to you about your plan to defeat someone who is the overwhelming favorite in this race. But before we get to that, you're a music teacher and then you're a civil rights lawyer. What was your role in the Supreme Court case Obergefell versus Hodges that gave us equal marriage in the country?
Yeah, so I was involved at the sort of ground floor level in those cases all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. So we filed the first marriage equality case in Indiana and the first case in Kentucky that was sort of touted as being the major decision, like the first decision in the South. It was one of the early opinions that came down that sort of gave the rest of the country permission to, to say this is the green light on marriage equality. That case eventually merged with cases from Ohio and Tennessee and Michigan, and went up to the United States Supreme Court, and it's what we now know as Obergefell.
So I went nuts at that on that day when that decision was handed down, because it really was historic. I said this is one of the historic moments that people will look back on a long time from now, and we got to live it. But you got to live it more than others. So I'm curious, how many lawyers worked on that case overall? And did you, when you say you brought all the way to the Supreme Court, what was your role by the time it got to the Supreme Court?
So I was lead counsel for the Kentucky plaintiffs all the way up. So I was there front and center, watching everything go on at the Supreme Court, and it still is kind of a surreal experience, as you can imagine, looking back on it. But we didn't have much time to celebrate because then I jumped right into the Kim Davis litigation, if you know about that, that went on over in Eastern Kentucky right afterwards, because we had a bunch of clerks really all over the country that refused to issue marriage licenses, and so we had to take on that legal battle, and that's what we did. And that one blew up a lot bigger than we expected it to.
All right, I'm declaring it then. Dan Cannon, civil rights hero. It's true. It's true. So now we're going to.
How many lawyers worked on that case, and I will tell you, I hate to interrupt you, but I mean, it was, over the years, over the decades, I mean, thousands, right? It was only 30 or 40 of us that were counsel of record in various states by the end of the whole thing. But I mean, that was the result of decades of work by activists, and we just happened to be there to put the last nail in the coffin. So
no, I hear you. I hear you. And there was a lot.
I'm a big fan of hero, but
yeah,
there are a lot of heroes.
No question. And Martin Luther King was not the only person that walked across that bridge in Selma, Alabama. But you were there, brother. You were there. That's a hero in my books. So now your incumbent is Trey Hollingsworth. He's a Republican. Trump won the district by 27 points. How in the world are you going to beat him?
Well, by knocking on doors and by making lots of phone calls and making lots of face-to-face contacts and essentially being a real person that cares about solving real problems within my district. So, Trump won the district by 27 points, but actually our Democratic candidate for Congress in 2016 did 14 points better than Hillary. Because she was out there and engaged in that kind of work. I mean, in a normal year, that would have been enough to win, right? She was out there and engaged in the work of talking to the people and trying to actually connect with people. And over the last over the term of his that he's been in Congress, Representative Hollingsworth has shown, like a lot of other Congress people, this stunning lack of ability to connect with real people who are experiencing real problems. And as your last guest was talking about, there's this massive problem of campaign finance that tends to lead to multimillionaires that come from multi-generational wealth, like Representative Hollingsworth, getting into office. And then when rich guys get into office like that, they have a tendency to just solve rich guy problems if they don't make an effort to actually figure out what real people are suffering through on a day-to-day basis. in the district. And, I've been through that. I've been poor in Indiana. I was raised by a single mom. And I, dropped out of high school and I got my GED and I put myself through college and I put myself through law school. And I've represented lots of people that have been addicts and that have been, very poor and victims of police violence and victims of the kind of stuff that go on a day-to-day basis in Indiana. And there's just no way that somebody like Hollingsworth can relate to that, and he's not trying. And I think if we demonstrate to people that and we're seeing it work now. I mean, I think if we demonstrate to people that we're willing to get out and get our hands dirty and talk to people about what they're really going through and work with them on solutions that we can come up with right here and take back to Washington, people are going to respond to that. They've always responded to that in Indiana. And I don't think that 2018 is going to be any different. It's just that we have invested a lot at this point in time into making voter contact and showing people that we care about them.
Yeah. Now, poor Hollingsworth's only got $60 million, so I don't know if you're being fair to him. But look, it's okay. Of course, rich people can be great progressives and can help people and can understand people's plight too. But it doesn't appear that Hollingsworth's making much of an effort. And on the other hand, you're in a circle of folks where you're going to get a different perspective than the rich donors that he talks to. I saw that you're doing #DineWithDan, making some sort of democracy chili. Now, to be fair to Hollingsworth, you're also charging for that, all the way up to $25 to eat with you.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So last I heard, that Hollingsworth was not willing to meet with any constituents unless they, were paying $2,500 a plate. I think that it's possible for people who are wealthy, obviously, to go out and make the effort to try to understand what regular folks are going through. But I don't think that it's easy. If you've got somebody that's a multimillionaire that comes from multi-generational wealth, and on top of that has never lived in Indiana before, I don't think he's ever set foot in Indiana before about 2015. And then for somebody like that to come in, essentially to buy out a Republican primary and ride the Trump coattails to victory, which is a cover that he's not going to have in 2018. I think that exposes a major flaw in our system. And I think the way that we exploit that flaw is by going out and connecting and doing the stuff that Hollingsworth cannot do, which is he can outspend us for sure, but he cannot connect with people. He cannot understand what people are going through, and he's made no effort to do that. Like I said, this is a big problem in Congress overall, where you've got rich people going to, getting elected into office and then doing nothing but solving rich people problems. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I want to ask you before we're out of time a couple more of your policies, but I also want to give out the links if you want to help Dan. So if you're watching on YouTube, you'll obviously find those in the description box. Just click on them to donate or to volunteer. There's apparently a Cranky Cannon t-shirt as well. I like that. I'm big on t-shirts. CanonForIndiana.com if you're watching live. And links are also down below on Facebook in the comment section. So if you're gonna win on small donors, you need those small donors and you need those volunteers to get out there and to do the door knocking that Dan's talking about. Okay, so Dan, you're for getting money out of politics. You're a Just Democrat. That means you don't take corporate PAC money. You're for universal health care. I see that. I always try to find the things that set you out from a little bit from the other candidates. You've got on your to-do list here that you are against exorbitant interest fees. So what can you do about that in Congress?
Yes, sir. Well, I think we can establish a nationwide usury rate, which, by the way, is exactly the opposite of what legislators are trying to do here in Indiana. We just had a vote at the state legislature where they've voted to allow payday lenders to go up to something like 200% interest on payday loans, and essentially return to a state of where you've got a lender that owns a borrower, right? And so they've got them trapped in a loan that they can never pay back ever. We should be going the opposite direction from that. We should be establishing nationwide usury laws. I think that there is no reason why a credit card interest rate or something like that should ever be over 15%. It's just more ways for then this has been the GOP agenda, as you well know. It's another way for rich folks to make money off the backs of the working class, and we can shut that down with legislation. We just have to have the political willingness to do it.
So look, in the business world, you know that interest rates that high are unsustainable. Donald Trump bankrupted himself even while running a casino, which seemed impossible, because he got junk bonds that were basically at a 14% interest rate. So that'll bankrupt even a casino. So will it bankrupt the average American? Absolutely, and some of these rates are in the hundreds, sometimes thousands of percent. It's preposterous. So look, and I breezed past the money in politics and the Medicare for all because a lot of your colleagues are in favor of that are running these upstart challenges, but we shouldn't. Imagine, just Democrats, for example, have 51 candidates. Imagine if we had overnight 51 people in Congress that were for Medicare for all. That would be amazing. That would be amazing. Yeah. So, but
that's what we're hoping for in 2019.
Yeah, that's right, because that's change. Everything else is okay, politics, etc. But what matters is the change in people's lives. So. And if you get those folks into Congress, they can actually push for Medicare for all. They could push for a constitutional amendment to get money out of politics and make that difference in your life. But before I let you go, I know we're past time here, but Dan, one more thing. You're also going after one of the organizers of the Charlottesville hate rally, Matthew Heimbach. How are you doing that?
Yeah, so if you'll remember, those of your viewers that watch the 24-hour news may have seen a video of a rally, a campaign rally in 2016 where Donald Trump invited a seething mob of white supremacists to attack my black client who was there to peacefully protest. And she walked up to the edge of the stage and held up a picture, didn't say a word, but held up a picture of Donald Trump's head on a pig's body. And he invited some of the white supremacists that he surely knew were on the ground at that period of time, by that point in the campaign, and one of them happened to be Mr. Heimbach. And I don't like to amplify his name or his message in any way, but they went after her and assaulted her on the floor of that convention center, and we sued him. And we sued him and some other white supremacists, and the Trump campaign and Donald Trump himself. And so that case is currently sort of wending its way through the appellate courts. We did manage to get the first meaningful opinion out of a federal court since the 1960s on what incitement really is, because the judge in the lower court said, yeah, he actually incited violence here, and he's not protected by the First Amendment, and the First Amendment does in fact have boundaries, and we think that's the right outcome.
All right, I got your campaign slogan. Dan, a cannon for justice.
There you go. There you go. It's my whole law practice too,
All right, sounds good. All right, Dan Cannon, thank you for joining us, and thank you for fighting for progressives, no matter what the odds are, particularly in Indiana there. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. I like our odds.
And I like that spirit. All right, that's it. We're done for Rebel Headquarters. So when we come back for the members in the post game, I'm going to read you some of the stories of conservatives who started watching TYT and then became progressives. You will love those stories. We'll be right back.